I wish I'd had this camera when I was covering conflict or when I was doing, docs.
Hello and welcome to Canon in Motion, our week of exclusive promotions on Canon products, which is pretty much one of our largest ever value add offers. This week at ProAV, each Canon product you buy will give you a value which you can spend towards anything on our tailored list of accessories. With all kinds of products on there, there's simple things like media and batteries, but there's also Flowtech tripods, on-camera monitors, lenses. The choice is yours. And today we're talking to Elisa, who's been using Canon for a huge variety of work, from stylized portrait photography to documentaries and conflict reporting. Okay, thank you so much for joining me, Elisa.
Thank you so much for having me.
That's all right. So shall we start with just a little bit of an explanation as to who you are and the sort of work you do for the audience at home?
Right, so I'm Elisa, I'm a cinematographer, and I am one of those people that tends to jump around a lot from in and out of the boxes that we're supposed to be in. So I've done everything from conflict reporting in a photojournalistic and also cinematography way, and then, shot feature drama. I'm shooting a commercial next week, so it's really just everything in between that falls into place.
I mean, the amount of different pieces of kit that must be used to straddle all the way from conflict reporting, which presumably is just like one or two of you, absolutely minimal, just one of you, okay, absolutely minimal equipment, all the way up to, high-end commercials and feature drama it's hard to comprehend, really.
It's it's very different worlds, but I do really like it because I find that with doc and photojournalism and all that, you just learn a lot about people, and you harness colors and textures from all over the world that you can then implement and bring into conceptual photography or even into the commercial world. I mean, you'll have seen something somewhere that just sparks your imagination. So I think they're actually much more together than we're led to believe. And I do think that by shooting conflict and shooting things that are like a one-time show, you're not going to ask someone to shoot someone else, again. It's like you learn to stay nimble and work quickly and just be very adaptable. So I think they're actually quite helpful to each other.
Absolutely. I mean, I speak to lots of camera operators that have come from the news background,
yes,
and it just gives you, and also weddings also is very similar.
Totally.
That gives you such a strong discipline as to how you shoot and what you know that you can do, and more importantly, what you know that you can't do, that you don't waste any time at all.
Yeah.
It must really give a good backbone for all the other work that you do.
Yeah, no, I always tell people, I know that there's a big stigma and taboo about, don't shoot weddings. I personally actually really enjoy that world, but
yep.
I think also, again, it's the whole thing. You can't ask someone to repeat their vows. You gotta be in your A game, you gotta get it the first time round, and that just ripples across to all other shoots that you do.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a huge amount of respect for people that do
Me
weddings.
too.
So much respect. But let's delve a little bit more into the Canon side of things and the kit that you end up using. What would you say are your go-to Canon products that help you do the work that you do?
Okay, so I had a very strong photography starting with Canon. So it was that long journey of when I was in university, I don't want to say how long ago, the 40D, you might know how long ago, the 70, the 70 Mark II, moving into the 5Ds, and more recently 5D Mark IV, which is my go-to photography world. Mm-hmm. And then in the doc world, I generally do use like the C300 range. Okay. And most recently got a chance to work with the C70.
How was that?
The C70?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was great. I mean, I think what I loved about the C70 more than anything was the dynamic range. So, I took it to Wales, I was cliff camping, I didn't have any extra lighting, and it was shooting right past sunset and then sleeping on a portal ledge where the sun's gone down and you want to see how much you can actually get. And it was fantastic. And also the Super 35 DGO sensor, which, basically comes from the C300. I was like, ooh, that's quite interesting. And that definitely piqued my interest, the ability to get, the two readings for every pixel of the best of the highlights, the best of the darkness, and then give me the cleanest image. I was quite surprised with the lack of noise in the darks. That made me very happy. And how portable it is as well.
I think the main thing with the C70 is just that that having that level of image quality, which you might expect from the higher up cameras, the C300 Mark III and the C500 Mark II, and from other competing manufacturers, but having it in that tiny little versatile
tiny body,
it must be great for docs work.
100%. And I think the one thing that I retrospectively wish I'd had this camera when I was covering conflict, or when I was doing docs. A few years ago, I was covering the cyclone in Mozambique that kind of destroyed half of a city. And having this camera would have just opened up so many more possibilities. The fact that it has internal NDs, but I don't actually need to have a matte box. The fact that it's so portable, but it has that high quality and that look. The fact that I can shoot straight into, HLG, PQ, and when you are on the field and you don't have time to be sitting at your computer color correcting, and Wi-Fi is terrible, and you can shoot quite low weight, codecs, it's like, I'm out, I'm shooting, I'm in, I'm sitting, and it's off. And all of that time is super helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, do you use the autofocus much in your work?
Yeah.
'Cause that I always latch onto as being pretty much the most useful technology that we have in the industry now for that kind of work.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic, especially when you're run and gun. And, in these kinds of environments, if you're a solo shooter, you don't have an AC, you don't have, you need that thing to be reliable, and you want the equipment to do what you want it to do. And I think having that, and having the ability to do, face priority versus not, and choosing really, do I want my focus to stay with the person all the way through? Do I want to stay where I was? All of that is very helpful in terms of the creative decisions as well.
Absolutely. So with the C70 that can straddle sort of both realms, if you like, it's got the image quality of the higher end, more constructed work that you can do, and then it's got the portability. Do you think you're still going to lean towards picking up lots of different cameras, or can you see that bleeding a little bit more into the rest of your work?
I think for every shoot, there's the best camera,
Yeah.
So I find it difficult to just have an umbrella answer. But I certainly think that in terms of versatility, the C70 has brought something in that I didn't have before. So I think that would be my leaning.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what are your go-to? What do you look for in equipment for each of those sort of different areas that you do? What's important to you?
Well, obviously when you're a solo shooter, you're doing doc, or you're doing remote environments or challenging environments, you want something that keeps you nimble. Every dead battery weighs on you, and you need something that's rugged, because it's gonna get banged with something at some point. You want something that has long battery life, and you want something where you're not gonna need to carry a whole bag of lighting setups that are just gonna draw attention to yourself, or are gonna intimidate people, and you're not gonna be able to actually get the real stories. So I think that in that sense, the C70 is fantastic. For something like a feature or commercial, I mean, obviously it's going to depend. I do generally work with, the airy range a lot. So
yeah, the C70 is not going to walk in and replace an Arri on any sets anytime soon. I'm not delusional. Don't worry, don't worry. But I just think it's interesting now that there is that blending of capabilities between these cameras which have got such radically different ergonomics, because I do think it's the ergonomics nowadays that are really going to stop you doing that.
Yeah.
Because I think actually if you took that camera, or even the little R5 that's next to you, onto one of those sets with the image quality that those cameras can do, I actually think people would be very happy with the final result. It's just the steps to get you there, and the ergonomics and the way that you work with their camera as a crew that would be a bit more of a hurdle. And that's why, of course, Canon have the C700 and the C500 Mark II and the C300 Mark III in their modular style. I mean, I think when you were describing the sorts of things that you look for in a camera, the original C300 just kept coming back to my mind. I can see why you settled on that one as your docs camera. Which camera in their current lineup, the mirrorless cameras going to the C70, to the C300 Mark III, and then the C500 Mark II, which of those do you think embodies that the most? Do you lean towards the C70 for that, or is it still the C300 in the lineup, or?
I think, again, it depends on the project.
Yeah.
Because once again, I think the C70 is, if you're solo and if you're run and gun, I think my leaning would be towards that.
Yep.
Just because of how nimble it is. And we have seen a tendency with basically all cameras to just be more and more compact as we go along, right? But I think, you know, if it's something that I want to take my time with a bit more, I might go for the C300 Mark II, Mark III, or even a C500, which I would love to.
Yeah. Absolutely. So presumably a lot of these projects that you do, you shoot handheld. Shall we talk a bit about the stuff around the camera a little bit? Is it mainly handheld?
It's not mainly handheld, but there are moments where I have to shoot handheld. And for that purpose, I do really like the ability to have an image stabilizer that's reliable. So I do like the RF lens compatibility on the C70 because that makes it all seamless and faster. Combined with the autofocus, it's really helpful to have the full package.
Absolutely. I think it's something that people talked about a lot with the C70 when it came out, was how good is that stabilization with it just being in the lens. Because of the increased communication now, you know, there was a lot of cries when people, I wish that had a stabilized sensor as well. But then also some customers sort of feeding back on that, going, no, we don't want a sensor that moves, we want a sensor that's still, and then we want to choose when it's stabilized. Where do you sit on that? Do you wish it did have a stabilized sensor, like something like the R5, or?
To me, the image stabilizer is not a replacement for having, you know, a movie or something else that you add to it. It's just a tool to help you out in a moment of like, I really need to get this.
Yeah.
So for me, I'm happy with where it's at. I think if I wanted something that's truly, truly seamless, I would just add something to it.
So how much of your work is split between stills and video? You mentioned that you came to Canon from a sort of photography background. Is that still something that you do a lot of?
Well, it's ironic because I came from a cinematography background, but at the time, because I was a student, I couldn't afford anything. So
we all know that feeling.
What drew me initially to DSLRs was the quality that they brought at that time, and you know, my budget. I generally always shot film and cinematography until about 6 years ago. I came up with an idea for a project, which is an art installation, which was predominantly photography. And it was on sexual violence. It was conceptual photography, working with 25 sexual violence survivors around the world, men and women from different racial backgrounds, and basically translating how they were made to feel after the assault. So say, for example, if someone went, I felt like I was drowning and I was underwater, the shoot was underwater. If somebody said I was surrounded by danger and maybe they were in Africa, we actually had like lions surrounding them. So it was very conceptual, very much coming from that filmic background of creating sets in order to translate the realm of someone's imagination.
What drew you towards Canon for that work on the photography side of things?
That I'm a Canon girl, like for sure, through and through. Like my first camera that I purchased in photography was the 40D. And as a true Mexican, I lived a rice and beans diet for about a month as a student to be able to afford it. Gotcha. I did not enjoy that process. But
worth it though, right?
Yes, exactly. I survived, it's all good. But after that, I just, you know what, I think it was that attachment of having sacrificed so much personally to get that camera and it being so meaningful to me, that I just stuck with it. And I never really want to shoot anything else when it comes to stills.
Right, fair enough. So now that Canon has had this last year, where they've basically just taken their entire lineup and refreshed it. Yeah. You know, Canon have released more cameras in the last year and a half than I feel like they've released my entire career so far. Has that changed things for you? Can you see yourself leaning towards some of those? How is that going to influence the way that you work, do you think?
I mean, this right here is what I've got my eye on.
That's the next one on your list, is it? Yep.
But yeah, I mean, all the mirrorless cameras, all that. To be honest, I'm kind of a calm observant at the moment because I do feel like there's so many rapid changes. So I haven't settled on one, but I mean, this camera is unreal. I mean, it's fantastic. So I think that's my leaning at the moment, but I'm not making any like firm decisions just yet.
Try them out and see.
Yeah. No. Yeah.
Cool. Okay, thank you so much for joining me. That's been great.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.